Everything was just burr, just going up and down 100 revs as you went along. And this sound all the way up there, an incredible, eerie sensation of loneliness, yet a man on his own.
Exactly.
It was like climbing to the bloody stars.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely incredible because you're sitting in the shell and there you are. And it's actually silent except for the whine of the engine. It's an amazing experience. But we had it for a whole minute, and that's a long time to it's not just like up there and down. It just went on. It was magic.
What gives us our edge? And how do we go beyond it? How thin is the line between taking part and tipping into victory? What inspires those moments of rare advantage that change the shape of a race? Are winners born or made? And what happens when things go wrong? Or when it all goes right? Welcome to The Edge. We'll be talking to people operating at the very edge of possibility. From athletes to actors, and from artists to entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Theo van den Broeke. Watch out. This is The Edge, a podcast by TAG Heuer.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Edge. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here live in the Porsche garage at Le Mans for the racing ahead this weekend. My name's Nicholas Biebeck. I'm the Heritage Director for TAG Heuer, and I'll be hosting today's podcast with two legends of motor racing, multidisciplinary specialists, multiple Le Mans winners in the room. So it's amazing to have Derek Bell, a personal hero of mine, 5 times overall Le Mans winner, 4 times of which with Porsche, and Neel Jani, overall winner in 2016, also has been through the Formula E program and is back in World Endurance Championship here. It's so great to have you guys both with us for this podcast. So thank you very much for joining. Just to kick off quickly, Derek, can I ask you, what does being here at Le Mans mean to you? And can you explain a bit about your role in the racing this weekend?
Well, it's rather like being home because I did race here for the first time in 1971. It's a long time ago, isn't it? And that's 50 years or something, isn't it? Yeah, that's ridiculous. Anyway, 51, and I was driving for Ferrari. We'll have to use that name occasionally. It's part of my history. And I obviously stayed here and worked on the McQueen movie for 3 months after that first race I did, driving Ferrari and also Porsche with Joe Siffert and Steve. So Le Mans became almost my second home. I spent so much time here. Then I did basically 26 years out of 27 racing here, just missed 1 year. And, so it really has become my home. And the races are so long, and we finished a tremendous percentage of them. So I guess I've been around here a few times.
You certainly have. And what's bringing you back? What's your role now with the organization?
Well, this year, eventually, you become the Grand Marshal. Neel, if he sticks around long enough and keeps his nose clean, he'll be here as well one day. But, it's a great honor to be asked to be the Grand Marshal. It's something I was never in a rush to do because I just like racing. But when they start to call you a legend when you're in your 40s, you're in for trouble when you get into your late 60s and early 70s. But it is fantastic to be back with all the people. And like there's guys at Porsche I still recognize who actually recognize me, which is probably more important, from those early days. And I have strong affection and obviously relationship with Porsche because, I've stayed with them. I'm part of a Porsche dealership in America and that sort of thing. So it's part of my pedigree.
An amazing legacy here, Derek. So amazing to have you back with us. And Neel, understandably, you're a bit busier this weekend. You've got quite a lot going on, but what does it mean for you being back here? Obviously overall winner in 2016 and now in the RSR. What makes it special for you?
Le Mans is this one race where you come and anything can happen. It's just proven over history, and it has this big myth, this big history, which makes it even nowadays special. And because of what happened in the past with guys like Derek on this track and many other great racing drivers. So it's always special to be here.
Fantastic. And now we know why we're here and what we're doing, and to be live at this amazing circuit is fantastic for us. Derek, can we rewind a little bit, and can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in motor racing, and what really brought you into the four wheel world?
I really feel sorry for Neel having to sit there and listen to this stuff. I apologize, Neel, but
I like history.
I know. History, I love it. Well, it was after the Second World War we're talking about, so we're looking good.
But I think most things we actually enjoy nowadays in the cars in terms of already safety, but also technology, came because of what happened and what you guys developed. And it's just a process, and that's why I think history is an important part for a racing driver also to understand, to know what you have nowadays, and also what you can contribute to the future. And that's why. So go ahead. I'm happy to listening.
Yeah. No, I mean, from the beginning, I grew up on a farm in England. We had several hundred acres. So I was driving from the age of 9. So driving was second nature for me. And obviously at a certain stage, I thought, I wouldn't mind doing a bit of racing. And Goodwood, the racetrack at Goodwood, I can see part of the track. I live on the sea in the complete south of England, but 6 miles away is Goodwood. And so I used to go up and be about 13, 14, used to be a corner worker, or we call it a marshal in England. And I was there the day Sterling Moss in 1962 had his big crash, which finished his career, which seems remarkable, really. And, I just wanted to race. But of course, in those days, there weren't racing schools, particularly. Or how did you start? I didn't have any money to start with. And I always found that a puzzle with young people, how the hell they ever do it. Like, how did he do it? And I maybe find out in a minute. But you want to do it, but who the hell's going to pay for you to do it? Because your parents are never keen on putting up money, if that's the case, to go out and try and kill yourself. So, it's a bit tricky. But I think I was in my teens when I heard about the Jim Russell Racing School. So I went there as I left college. And I did very well. And Jim Russell one day picked me out as having an unusual, exceptional talent, he actually said. And he said, I can do nothing more for you. You haven't finished the course, but you should go out. I guarantee within a year you'll be in a factory team. So that was me out of that driving school stuff. And of course, 2 years later, I ended up going to partnership with a friend with the little Lotus 7, and I won my first race at Goodwood in the rain. And then my father then became interested because, people said to me, you can't let this guy stop. So we continued with Formula 3, and then I went up to Formula 2, and on my third race in Formula 2, I had a good result against Jackie Stewart and people like that at Thruxton and in Barcelona. And I got a call from Enzo Ferrari. And then sort of things started to fall in place. And Jimmy Clark had been killed at Hockenheim. That was my second race in Formula 2, which shattered me somewhat because he was my hero on the track. Has been ever since, really. He was such a clean, modest sort of driver and immaculate the whole time. Never got into trouble, but something broke that day and it wasn't his fault, and as it often isn't. And so that was really how I got started. And, as I say, I actually went to Ferrari, which a lot of people said was a big mistake. He'll ruin your career. But I think if you ask Neel, in his career, he probably would like to drive a Formula One car for Ferrari. There's something about it, even with Enzo not being there. And just to have had that 18 months raving for the fact, my first Formula 2 race as a professional, my first Grand Prix was the Italian Grand Prix next to Jackie Stewart and Denny Hulme, that sort of thing on the third row. And my first Le Mans was in 1970 with Ferrari, with Ronnie Peterson. So it's funny I should have that sort of, thoroughbred back there. Yet I went to Porsche straight away. And then, of course, with Porsche, we had a lot of successes with the 917s. I was there the last year of that project, and God, it was a magnificent car. We were doing 396 down Mulsanne that year, which is pretty quick.
That's how they put in the chicanes now, no?
Exactly, yeah.
I didn't want, for you guys, it's just as well. You'd have been 500 kilometers an hour. But the car was so stable. But it was an amazing experience. And, that was the beginning. And then sports car racing in the 70s was not doing so well. But I raced a bit of Formula One and a bit of Can-Am and a bit of World Championship sports cars with Alfa Romeo, that sort of thing, and moved on.
Yeah.
And, then with Porsche, we had those great successes in the 80s with the 936, 956, 962. And I was part of that program. So really has been my life, has been with Porsche, to be honest.
and amazing that you spent your time between, you know, the two most illustrious teams in competition motorsport, really, you know, really great lauded powers. So, you know, just an incredible career.
Yeah.
So, Neil, can you tell us a little bit about, you know, obviously a very different era from when Derek got his start. You know, motorsport has changed dramatically, not only the cars, but also, you know, the financial and business aspects of it. You know, how did you get into the racing?
Basically a little bit like Derek. I grew up in Switzerland, and my dad always liked cars. We went go-karting there, and I used to do a bit of karting. We did some races then, Swiss Championship. That was still just hobby, you know. It always starts off as a hobby, you know. Yeah. It's not, there was no thought process of becoming race driver. It's just like, okay, we like it. And then I remember going rental karting in a track in Switzerland, and there was a guy called Peter Collins, which you might know.
Oh yes,
former Lotus.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, he was there in Switzerland, and then he was like, "Oh, you need to do more racing." So with him, his connection, then I started doing international go-kart races, and then we started looking at it a bit more professionally, and that's when it started taking off. And he's still a good friend. We never had any management, but he's a good friend because he doesn't live too far from where we are, and went to Formula Renault and so on, and won. I think the deciding point, maybe that's one important thing, deciding point to when I became a professional racing driver or not, or when we decided to go ahead, was 2002 in Spa. We had a Formula Renault European Championship race, and I was on pole. It was 69 cars or so, and it rained overnight, and it was just like, you know, these semi-conditions.
We know Spa in the rain.
It was these semi-conditions, so I opted to go for rain tires. I was on pole. I thought maybe last laps would be okay. I was 17, and there were a lot of good drivers on the grid. If I look back, you know, there was Lewis Hamilton, there was Robert Kubica, Christian Killian, Jamie Green, Bruno Spengler. I mean, I think the top 15 all have made a professional career. So I won that race with 8 seconds lead. And then I got called by McLaren, first time Dave Ryan, which you might know as well. And but also Williams and Sauber, Formula One team. So that was for us, I think now we need to look at it. And that was at the age of 17, 18. So that was basically, I would say, the turning point.
It's amazing to think that, you know, you guys have made this incredible career out of motor racing, but, you know, as you both said, you don't really think about it as a career to begin with, and you probably need a contingency plan. And
there's one thing I'd love to say. This is what it's a big difference between us, although we had a similar way. Is I never sat in a race car till I was 23.
Oh wow!
Because we didn't have karting, you see.
Yeah,
so I drove farm tractors when I was 10 years old, doing 12 miles an hour. You know, and so that is the big difference, that we started much later than they did, that had to be such an advantage to him. But I'm not saying I had an advantage or he had. The fact was, it meant that everybody has an advantage to get into the rules of the road of driving cars so young, whereas in our era we really didn't.
Yeah,
if you follow me.
And
now I think you went to the next step, no? And that's the simulator.
Yeah,
now
of course.
the
esports and
the younger drivers which are coming, I can see that I'm now actually one of the older ones.
Yeah,
because they already do simulators at the age of 7, 8, 9. They know all the tracks. They come to a track, they're well prepared. There is no thing like a new racetrack. There is no thing that they don't know the steering wheel with the buttons. And there are a lot. The next step of preparation is already happening there. So nowadays, if you don't do a simulator, you're also in trouble. And I think it's interesting just the evolvement. And so in that way also, I'm getting quickly old.
But the interesting thing also there is what he's saying is that, because we went, I always use the Nürburgring as an example. 170 odd corners on the old track, if not more then actually. And I went around in my E-Type for 6 laps, and it wouldn't do more than 4 without burning the brakes up. And I wasn't going past it, just to stop it going downhill. But, there's no way to learn a track. And nowadays, as he said, I guess you've obviously raced the ring. You've no doubt have ridden some of it in probably a good simulator at some point.
I've only seen it on simulator first.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, didn't learn it differently.
No. I'm never sure about simulators because the ring has got such a feel to it. You know, we're coming off the ground and the feel of the car coming off. I guess I've driven on a good simulator. I have to say the Hong Kong, funny enough, but the only time. But it never gives you enough sensation. I mean, would you say that's true?
Yeah, obviously, you know, the running over crests and so
Yes.
on, how the car falls
Yes,
and so on.
yes,
But
yes,
that's
yes.
where I think the go-karting is important.
Yeah,
It's the
okay.
basic feeling you produce as a
Yeah,
kid.
yeah.
But for the line stays the same. The bumps you feel in the sim, obviously how you handle it is then the question. But you don't come anymore to like the Schwedenkreuz
No.
thing. You don't turn up there and are surprised. Oof, we
Yes.
get the air there nearly. Or
Yeah, that's right.
there's no surprises anymore.
No, good.
Well, I guess there's this component of being a good racing driver, you know, entry and exit speeds, following the line and everything else. But then, you know, from the sim and all this kind of stuff, you know, these young drivers can learn the etiquette, they can learn the buttons on the wheels, and they can learn, you know, getting in and out the pit lane. So it's, you know, as you say, it's a very, very different era, and it really gives them a head start in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, I guess for each generation, it's a level playing field because you all have the same ingredients. But just to move on to the next step, you know, obviously, the two of you have raced in a whole host of disciplines in motorsport. Derek, you've done Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1, endurance. Neel, you've done endurance, you've done Formula E.
Yeah, Formula E, Formula 2, Formula 1 as well tested. So
You know,
in all the cars, yeah.
What's so special about endurance racing? You know, what really makes it so close to both of your hearts?
I think we're sick. That's the problem. Who needs pain for 6 hours or 24? I mean, when you think about it, I mean, they have 3 drivers and it's slightly different. We had 2 drivers. So I knew I couldn't fail because if I failed, we were out. There's a possibility if he was out, the other 2 could carry on. That's the only way I'd look at it, is that there was always a bit of relief there. But you went into a race going, God, if I screw up or I feel ill or I eat something I shouldn't eat, you know, we're out. But that's as far as that's concerned, not the driving. I just think that I think endurance racing suits some drivers better than it does others. I know it's called endurance, and it is, but I mean, these days they drive them absolutely flat out. We drove them flat out to a different limit. You know, I mean, I never remember going around slowly and saying, "Oh, just cruise here." There was none of that. I mean, it was always flat out, but they were telling you we were trying to conserve fuel inevitably all the way through the 80s. It was purgatory, and so you'd have to have the boost down. You had the mixture, everything was down, but you had to drive it flat out, but save fuel. And that was a horrible way to go. It got better because the reason Porsche Go Racing is for the development of something. Every race has to be the development of something. Every time I moaned about some new thing like the PDK coming on, and then we had ABS was put on us just before practice or qualifying at Fuji. I mean, what a bloody thing to do to us. I was already struggling through PDK, and then they say, and this weekend, Mr. Bell, you will drive with the ABS. And I'm going, that's not really very fair, you know, but it wasn't just me, it was all of us, but it was crazy. But you know, Porsche's philosophy is you have to be developing something. And that's what we've done and that's what endurance racing has done to a great degree, I think, is improved the car.
Yeah, I think one thing which has a huge influence nowadays is software. And I think the most difficult thing is to produce a car which still feels natural that you drive, and yet the software works in its way to assist you. Because what happens mostly is you have a software that works very well, and you have to drive to the software. But then it's not natural. So that's the constant struggle nowadays to, well, how can I rely on my feeling and make the software work, you know, with brake bias, migration, a bit more front, rear, TC, torque vectoring. Okay, it's not allowed anymore, but you have all these things, and I think that's again where it comes in with the simulator, you know, the young guns which just do simulate driving, they just drive according to the software. And this developing in that way, you can see it's going more that direction, but the big struggle or the big difficulty is how do you keep it natural so that you can rely on your senses. And this is the biggest story right now, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, when you get back, ours was quite crude. It was very basic. I mean, I don't think they're any more intelligent than we were or was ever necessarily better than him or he better than me. We were just bloody good at what we did. And he adapted to the way he's had to go, and I had to adapt the way we were given, and that was it. I always say, put any of these young guys, or put Lewis Hamilton, in Fangio's Mercedes, and he would have been good. Let's say, use him as an example for this. Because if you're a racer, you're a racer. I know we're talking about the balance of the car and all that. That's a hell of a lot they've had to learn, and I'm not sure that I want to do that. I just wanted to get out and race. And I swear that's what they want too. And I remember David Coulthard saying to me one day, the only time we can really enjoy it is when the flag drops and off we go, because it's up to us then. And, they can't tell us anything from the pits anymore. We're on our own going for it. And I thought, well, I admire them for that. But what a pain in the arse, because we never had to worry about the technology side. They set the car up, told us that, we would change the handling of the car, of course.
Yeah.
But, when it came to mixtures and all the different items you're talking about, we didn't have to worry. And I suppose in a way he's grown up with it, that it is part of his body now, so he's used to it. He's never thought, if he looks at it like, well, he must go, they're lazy bastards in those days, because they didn't have to
Well, actually, I have a good story there, because you call it that the technology you guys had crude, it was very simple or crude, but actually, we ran the Solitude for the Porsche Museum. I ran the 62 Formula 1 car from Porsche.
Oh, yes.
And the museum told us that actually they can't use the young drivers anymore nowadays, because they don't know how to stick shift with the gears and everything. So for them, it's not simple technology. For them, nowadays, it's hard, difficult technology.
Yes.
Because you don't need to learn. So I still learned it from the very old days when I drove road cars, but I'm just in the middle. So they said you and Andre, we were one of the last ones to be able to drive those cars. It's just interesting how this.
Yes, I understand. I think it's such a good point, because often people say to me, "Thank God we got you driving the car this weekend, Derek, because you know how to shift gear." You can't believe it, can you? And you go, "Really?" You assume everybody can. I've got two sons, and one's 22 now, and he couldn't wait to get to learn to drive manual, because he knew he had to, because he wants to be able to drive everything at any time, not racing any particularly, but just driving.
Yeah.
And I think it's such an asset.
Well, and it's amazing, I've spoken to a number of other, professional drivers and a lot of motoring enthusiasts, and they go from, a 62 2-litre short wheelbase 911, and then they go to a brand new GT3 RS or something. And it's totally different. There's no real comparison between the two. Totally different mindset to thinking and how you drive. Okay, there's some fundamentals underneath, but they're, chalk and cheese, really. So big changes.
That's why I would say it's not simple technology, really, anymore. It's a point of view.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's a time point of view. You can't say it was more simple, because some can't handle it from nowadays, what happened then.
No.
And when you look at a car like the 917, with huge horsepower, ultra lightweight, clearly that's a tricky thing to drive, but so is a 919 Evo.
Turbo lag.
Exactly. No, we know that. Well, the turbo. No, I drove the Can-Am car too. That was quite a monster. I remember
that had a turbo lag.
I drove it at Goodwood, up the hill at Goodwood. I did it at Weissach soon after we'd won one of the cars in the 80s.
Was that the Brumos one?
Yeah, I just drove the one from the factory, which is identical anyway, pretty much. And we went to Goodwood, and I remember after my first run, every time I accelerated, I got clutch slip, and I came back down to Peter Falk, because it's only 4 gears on the bottom, Peter Falk, and I said, Christ, Peter, I think you're going to have to, do something about the clutch, because I said it's slipping every time I accelerate. He said, no, that's not clutch. He said that's wheel spin. And I was going up the hill, and every time I tapped, and the wheels would just spin, and I thought it was clutch slip. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000+ horsepower or something.
We had 1,300 if you needed it, but I only drove it with 1,000, and I think they probably cut it back a bit from that. But that was you've driven it.
I have not driven the Brumos one. I've driven the one from Jackie X, the Jules car.
Oh, that was the 935.
It was. I think you
drove it.
It
was my car. We won with that.
Yeah, exactly. It was the winning car, because that had a huge turbo.
Yeah, that's right. It did. Well, they did.
And then it goes.
Yes, it's strange that we did, but of course, then we went to the 962. I mean, that car was what became a 962 engine. And that car was sitting in the museum.
Yeah.
And at the end, when it came to that year, which is 1982, who was it? Peter Schutz, the president, American guy, president of Porsche, can you believe? He said, what are we going to run at Le Mans this year? And they said, well, last year we drove the 924 Carrera GTS or GTR that I drove. We had 3 cars there. And they said, we've got nothing to drive yet because of the new rules coming out, which was the 962 coming out. And he said, but we must have a car to win the race somewhere. They said, well, we have the 936 in the museum. And he said, but the engine's really not up to it anymore. So they were walking, apparently, stories around the museum. And Peter Schutz, they were in the engine department. He said, what's that there then? They said, that's the engine that we built for Indy. So he said, well, can't we just run that in the car, but make it run on fuel rather than methanol? So they put it in the car. We took it to Le Mans and we won Le Mans. And that's the car you drove, you see.
Yeah.
But it still had lag.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, obviously it wasn't twin turbo, but it was
long first gear also.
Yeah.
Super long first gear.
But it was a heck of a project, you know, and that was the beginning of the 962 era, really, or 956.
I mean, that's an amazing topic to touch on. You know, this development from the 935 to the 936,
Yes.
and then obviously the 962.
Yes.
You know, Derek, obviously you've driven all of these kind of legends from Porsche Motorsport, and
Yeah.
Neel, it sounds like you've had a go in all of
Yeah.
them. You know, how do you benchmark them? How do you compare them? Is there any which are particular favorites for you?
I mean, all I tell you is a 935, and I don't know if you really drove a hot one, but I mean, those things used to make your hair curl. I mean, you get in it, and I used to get in that 93, which is the 911 looking car. I used to get in it, and I drove with John, I drove right at the very end of that era, so the car was perfected as far as being quick in every respect. It was basically Kramer did the they were called a K4, I think, or maybe more than that. And they had so much power. But I mean, I used to get in it, and you had the gear lever was up almost by your shoulder like this. And you get in the car, I'd start the engine up, and I would say, normally it's you or me. Today it's me. And I just I stick it into first gear and just off you'd go. And you come to the corners, there's massive wheels on the back, and you're just going to push like hell. So you turn in the corner and you're waiting, come on, power, like this, you know, and then and off it
And then he pushes.
And you had to turn it absolutely perfectly so that the power came on, and when the wheels spun, they spun out, and you got the line out the corner. But what an animal. That was the real animal of the Porsches, in my opinion. But it was a perfect animal. You know, you knew what it was, you attacked it, and it was a real man's car. So if you ever get the chance to, you know, flex your muscles and get in and grin it and drive it, it's magnificent, actually.
Okay.
And Neel, any for you? I mean, you know, obviously your career is dominated by the modern era, you know, the 919, which has become an equal legend in the Porsche history, but then, you know, the RSRs of today, which are just amazing pieces of engineering.
Yeah.
Anything there or anything from the past that really, you know, speaks to you?
I've driven all the old ones, so 917, obviously the Jules car, but I've never pushed them hard, you know. So it's hard to compare to when you drive on the limit, I think, and driving just for exhibition a bit around. But in that terms, for me, for sure, it's the 919 because I had the pole positions here 2 in a row, the lap record I did on that one. It was for me, that's the era I've been in, and where I've obviously developed the car from zero up, and with a lot of gimmicks and technology, also over 1,000 horsepower. 4-wheel drive.
Yeah, amazing.
So from that point of view, I think that was really the car at the moment, the latest with a lot of technology, which we see now in the road car.
Yeah. I say one thing about what he's saying is that he didn't quite say it, but the fact is, to me, I remember being told for qualifying, I had everything I had in the 962, and just give it everything you've got. And you must have had that at a certain point in qualifying. And that this circuit is unbelievable when you're absolutely got everything on the limit. You know that you can take sort of chances with it, because if you stuff it, well, we got 24 hours to rebuild it. But it's not the race. You're not letting anybody down. And it's the most amazing place when you just go out there, and it's like you've got a wild animal, and it just flows. And even last night I did a lap in one of the RSRs, and it was just fabulous to drive. For me, having not driven here for 15 years, but these corners, none of them are nasty. Not really, maybe a bit off.
Yeah.
They flow, and that's what you want. And they keep building these tracks with these corners that tighten up. This track is still flows, I reckon, and that's what makes the beauty of it.
And I wonder if there's an element of the fact that, due to the fact that you've both raced here over the 24-hour period, you've put in so many laps over and over and over again. You become so familiar, and there's not many serious corners on the track that you can really embrace it and get close to it and feel this flow and this rhythm. I have the utmost respect for both of you, because I imagine this, driving through the night, you're thundering down Mulsanne at full throttle. What does it really feel like? What's this emotion when you're sitting there in the cockpit by yourself, just in this moment, enjoying it? Derek, I mean, is there anything?
Look at me first, but you don't have to. But I'm sure the thing is, we used to have it, without the chicanes, and it had a different atmosphere. Because I remember when we used to drive into the track on a Monday, or whenever you came in, you drive into the town for the Place de la République, for the scrutineering, which no doubt had its early stages for you. And you drive in there and you drove that bloody tunnel coming under the cathedral, and suddenly you're going, I'm going to be driving into the unknown tomorrow afternoon, because you knew that every time I drove, it was a newer car than had been the year before, or a better car. And you're going to be doing something that nobody else had ever done. I know your teammates are doing it too, but you individually are going to do it. And this track has that uniqueness that, to me, no other track has in the world, because you've never done it as often. And, you'd get onto that track and out you'd go, and you have so much respect for it because it is so fast. And I think that's the amazing thing about it. It's purely the speed and having the car that will do it. And because of Porsche, they've done it for donkey's years, as we say in English. And so they know all the answers. They know absolutely everything about it and what to do, whether it was the 917 in my first time. And Norbert said to me that after test weekend, and he was walking across the paddock, and he said, hey, Junge, he said, how many revs are you pulling on your last run today? And I said, 8.1. And he said, that is good, because at 8.2 she blows up. And I thought, this is German technology just taken to that limit, They're unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then he started to laugh, and he had a slide rule because he didn't have computers. I mean, talk about the shit you have. He didn't have a computer. He had a slide rule, and he's working it out, walking across the paddock. And he started to laugh. I said, what are you laughing about? He said, I just calculated your top speed. So I said, what is it? He said, I think it better you don't know. And I said, look, if we got to drive this thing for 24 hours, it really is nice to know. It's just a nice thing to know. And he said, well, allowing for tire growth, that's 396 kilometers. I went, geez, bloody whiz.
That's why they didn't put a gauge in, so you didn't know how quick you go. They just gave you the revs.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that was the way Porsche did it. And I mean, it never let us down. I mean, we never had accidents as such.
And Neel, from your side, what's that sensation like, blasting through the night all on your own in the cockpit?
I think in one way it's two different things. Qualifying is obviously not that important for the race, but yet it's still important. It's just a thing. Because it's the moment, as Derek before said, you get new tires, low fuel, full power. It's everything. And you have to go for it. You can take every curb, you go for it. So also that around this track, even nowadays, you go for it. It means taking risks, which you have to take. There is no quick lap around Le Mans without a risk. And for me, still the moment in 2015 when I had my first pole with the 919 and that lap record. I remember they said, okay, 10 o'clock, qualifying starts. You go out first, one set of tires, one run.
Yeah.
All cars line up, the Audis, Toyotas, all of us. And I knew it's now or never. And it should be a front row for Porsche. First time with the 919, that was the aim. And just that pressure build up and the kind of excitement, but you also know it's turn one Dunlop. It needs to stick. And when you come out of that corner, you start off a quali lap good in turn one, it's going to go. You started off bad, it's just, it already all falls apart.
It's a long way around.
Yeah. And for me, that moment then, okay, that were all worked out. And then leaving the track, I had, that one song was on the radio. I still hear that song. It puts me right back in that time, that feeling of how I felt right then.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes Le Mans special. You relate with either a song or something. It just puts you back in the moment of that tension. fear is the wrong word, but respect of the moment and everything.
It's the only place you have that. There's no other track. I don't know, you might, but I don't use any other track. I'm sorry if I'm butting in, but I didn't actually totally answer your question about driving in the night. I'll very quickly do it because we didn't have the chicanes, as you know. So we were 1 minute full throttle. And 1 minute's a long time, flat to the floor in fifth gear. And I remember you're droning down that straight and it goes on and on and on and on. You need to look at an in-car in a big screen to sort of really visualize. You've done it, but with the chicanes, which in a way is a pity. Because if you did it flat, there's something about it at night. And you suddenly find how close you are to this car. You're sitting in it. In front of you, the control, of course, in our case, we could read things. There wasn't lights telling us. And you just look at it. And the water temperatures were the same on both sides of the engine. Oil pressure was consistent. Everything was just just going up and down 100 revs as you went along. And this sound all the way up there. And an incredible, eerie sensation of loneliness, yet a man on his own.
Exactly.
It was like climbing to the bloody stars. Yeah. I mean, it was absolutely incredible because you're sitting in the shell.
Yeah.
And there you are. And it's actually silent, except for the whine of the engine. It's an amazing experience. But we had it for a whole minute, and that's a long time to it's not just like up there and down. It just went on. It was magic.
It's true about that night driving. I still get that exiting Turtle Rouge towards the first chicane.
Yeah, sure.
And you're there at night and there's no car in front or back, or you just see them exiting the other chicane. You see the tail lights, someone far away at the back, no one. Photographers flashing. That's it. It gives you that feeling of loneliness at some stage, but in a positive way.
Yeah,
in a calming way.
It's almost romantic. It's a strange thing. You really feel part of that car. That car is you, and basically it's keeping you alive. I mean, it's amazing. You're part of the car. You're in it. You're holding it. It's just wonderful.
I mean, both of you have spoken about, the qualification spec thing I find fascinating, but we've probably not got much time to dig into it. But I think, this understanding of risk and this calculation of risk, you guys are clearly masters at it because, to make your way through the qualification and hitting every apex and doing what you've got to do, but then to survive these long stints at Le Mans, how do you balance this idea of risk and how do you make the decisions? And I mean, obviously, Derek, if you're in a 917 or something with virtually nothing separating you from the outside world, it's one thing. But, Neel, when you're in a 919 Evo with all this power underneath you and, the risk that you're going to hit a slower car, how do you do those calculations and how do you make those assessments in the heat of the moment? Neel, if you want to start with this one.
I was talking with Derek before. We said at his time, motorsport was dangerous and sex was safe, no? And with us, it's the other way around. So in a way, we have this, for sure, great technology for safety and so on. So small crashes don't hurt, really. But we do know when you go off with our car, because you're so quick in the Porsches or in Turtle Rouge, it's not necessarily that you will break a leg, but it's a G-force. Yeah. It's a G-force that you worry from, because the hit can just knock everything out of you.
Concussions and
and a lot more. And you can't breathe first moment you hit, then that's the worst feeling when you can't breathe. It's all these things that come together, but nevertheless, you don't think of that because racing in the end, it's for me, it's a calculated risk.
Exactly. I've used that term all the time.
If you take a risk, full 100% risk, you can do it once or twice, but it will not last long, even nowadays. I think it's about this calculated risk. And I think that's where you will find the good and the bad drivers at Le Mans, because there's many drivers who can be quick, but there's not everyone who can be exactly on this edge, knife's edge, without falling over.
They don't know the limit, do they?
Exactly. And I think that is where Derek said it correctly also, is in endurance racing, the ones which are good, they're just good on that edge. Overtaking cars, not taking too much risk. Sometimes give up a second, wait, and then go.
Well, it's great for me to hear you say that, because the one thing that's worried me about this modern era is they don't wait very much. And imagine how many times we caught cars. Well, there was a bigger speed differential in my day, I'm sure. But you catch a car going into well, let's say Porsche curves, for example. It's not always easy to get round somebody there because you're coming up so fast. But I would time it so I could pick them up between a corner rather than jump inside them, screw my line up and my time and screw his time. It's better to back off, lose half a second, but go by him and then make it up again, coming out. And I've always felt that. And I've watched quite a lot of their racing. And I always said the guys are getting a bit desperate. And to me, there's almost been too much inter-team fighting. Now, I haven't noticed it at Porsche, but I noticed it with another one of the companies. And I thought, why do they battle so much between cars? We're in a team. I mean, if I had done that in my day and punted one of my teammates off, John Wyer would have thrown the keys away and said, out of here. Don't bother to come back. One of my teammates, Mike Hailwood, had an incident in the rain. And when he eventually got back on the back of a motorbike, John Wyer stood and looked at him and he said, hello, Mike, don't call us, we'll call you. In other words, when we're ready for you to come back in 5 years' time, we'll call you, And that's it was like a headmaster. The other thing I must say, because I'm sure we've got to go, is the fact that he was talking about the curbs, you see. Now, from what I recollect, we could not hit curbs. And I think in some cases they might have been higher, but I certainly know we dare not hit curbs. And, I remember Norbert Singer saying, don't hit the curbs. So everything we did had to be between those flanges across the road. And I see them. I've seen a picture of it just somewhere magazine this morning. Car's got all four wheels bouncing off a curb. And the times I've seen it, I'm going, shit, we could never do that.
Yeah.
A lot of lap time in there.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Well, of course.
Curb riding nowadays, you do it properly, it's 1.5, 2 seconds a
Yeah,
lap.
it's amazing.
And the
isn't it?
thing is always with the curb, you either hit it full or not.
Yeah.
If you hit it halfway, it will throw you off.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's why we say qualifying is a full commitment lap, what's on the curbs.
Yeah.
In the race, you could not hit them flat out like that all the time because it will go wrong at some stage.
But I guess that's a product of this modern safety era where the curves have become a bit flatter and less slippery, and you've got a bit more track to play with. So different eras for different things.
Better suspensions and
Sure.
and data to see if you have a problem that could break the car. Nowadays we don't have to wait until it breaks. We can see it already thanks to sensors.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about computers a lot, but with modern CAD design and finite element analysis, it's a bit different from your slide rule calculating top speed. So I mean, one thing, we've got a bit of time for a few more questions, but I think one thing I really want to touch on is we're good friends with Porsche here, and we're in the garage with them. Let's just finish up on the note of Derek, you've driven for a couple of teams, but what do you think makes Porsche so successful here with so many overall wins at Le Mans? What is it? Is it the preparation? Is it the relationship with the drivers? Is it the engineering?
It's the total commitment to motorsport. So many people come in. They come in for 5 years, 3 years, and then duck out, and they sort of think they've got their bit of glory. They come in and basically screw up the future for a while with way out cars, way out technologies, and then clear off and leave us to tidy up the dirt. And Porsche have always been there. And I remember at one stage, or put it this way, people criticized Porsche. And I said, well, in my era, if it hadn't been for Porsche, there would have never been sports car racing, because the Group C era, they supplied all the cars for the grid. Now, when they built your 919s, I respect it was a different era. But if Porsche had built more of those and sold them to private teams around the world, they could have kept it going for years. But because one became so damn good, the other people had to drop out. And I think that's a pity. But when you were set, I mean, there would be 20 962s on the grid. And they weren't called Porsche. It was called the Lowenbrau car, the Rothmans car, the Richard Lloyd car,
the Walter Brunn car,
and the Urs car. I mean, all these different Porsche, but they didn't always use the word Porsche. Right? Porsche might say, well, we're not interested in that, left our names out there. But Porsche got their coverage. So every damn poster was about a Porsche car. But they supported sports cars to such a whole, and they have to be, celebrated for what they've done for racing. And even if they weren't at the highest level, they were at the low level with GTs. And they've always supplied. And I go, if it hadn't been for Porsche, there wouldn't be any bloody sports car racing. We'd all be racing MGs.
Yeah, they have a a great history because there's this famous advert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah,
So they have
exactly.
like
Yeah,
the
no.
top 10 except one is not a Porsche.
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
I got
think
my
it's great.
T-shirt out the other day, a fabulous red T-shirt, and I was going to wear it. I thought, I can't wear it. I don't wear those sort of shirts. But I literally got it out at home just last week. I unfolded it. A Porsche. Oh my God, that wonderful one.
And I
yeah.
think that's actually even for non-Porsche fans, someone who supports another brand or even for them, that's an iconic
Yeah.
T-shirt or an
Yeah,
iconic
yeah.
thing, and it goes beyond the brand there.
Exactly.
It goes for what we love in racing, Le Mans, and so on. And I think that's the bigger picture. In the end, we are all here for the same love.
And you think of this seriousness of all the preparation that Porsche put in to win overall, and then you get this great, German joke in a sense of this nobody's perfect. It's such a wonderful piece of the history. I guess we've got to get pretty close to wrapping up, but obviously we're looking towards the future now. We have electrification, we have the hypercar class coming. Do you guys have a bit of perspective on where you see the future going, and are you optimistic for how motorsport's developing long term? Neel, if you want to chime in.
I see it very positive now with these new rules, LMDH coming for endurance racing. First of all, they're building the quickest cars off the field so that customers can buy them again and can actually run them, because the 919, for example, was so complicated, it was impossible for a non-factory team to run it. And but there's Ferraris joining again, BMW is coming, Audi is joining, Peugeot is there, Toyota is there, so many brands all going for outright victory at Le Mans. And when have we seen that last time? I think Derek was there.
Well, probably not even in our era, but there was a lot of it. But
Yeah.
no, I agree with you. I think you have to look to the future in a big, big way, and not just a little way. I'm not the greatest electrical person. He is obviously after winning championships, but the reason I love Formula E is the fact it's given these guys who didn't have a decent drive for 2 or 3 years to get out there and keep their racing going. And there's more than the other chaps out there. And it always felt, it's such a devil when you've been right at the top of your racing for 3 or 4 years and suddenly they stop that, the rules change and they stop. But fortunately, Formula E was there to help them. And whatever if there's any criticism, I haven't got it for Formula E. I'm not a great electrical person. I just love the smell of an ordinary engine and the sound of a V12 at 10,000 revs.
We all love it, though.
Yeah. And so you can't get away from it, But I realized I'm in the old school, and that's all I really knew. And I've been driving an electric car. I drove it to Goodwood the other day, and it's an interesting experience, with 1,000 horsepower and all that stuff. It was pretty undrivable, but anyway. But it was an experience. But and I guess the future's there. What I can't quite get to grips is that there's no shifting gear.
Yeah.
I mean, twice I felt like vomiting when I first drove it. Once the first time up straight, the second time up the hill at Goodwood, and I put my foot down. It went.
But I think you have to differentiate nowadays. I think there is driving from A to B.
Yes.
How do you want to get from A to B?
Yes,
and you just get transported. And what's emotion? When do you want some emotion to drive? Let's say I'm driving from Switzerland to Le Mans, all on the motorway. I want to get A to B.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't care what it is. But I'm driving somewhere with a bit of emotion.
In the Alps.
And it's not in the Alps. And it's not about speed.
Sure.
It's about you
Feel.
take a 550 Spider, you just drive 50, 60 kph from the 50s, the car. It's just pure emotion.
Yeah.
And I think that is what's happening now, that it just differentiates what is show, fun, emotion, and what is just getting from A to B.
Yeah.
And I think that technology is coming, and now racing is finding its path, its way, what is show and what is relevant maybe for the car from A to B.
Yeah.
And that's why I think motorsport will have an interesting future, and I think also still a good future.
Yeah. I think you're both right. They're fantastic complementary forces, things like the Taycan for putting on the cruise control and hitting the auto routes. And then, of course, this great smell of, oil and petrol and, high RPM engines that are about to blow up because they've been so highly tuned, on the motorsport circuit. So, I think we're really fortunate for the era that we're in right now.
Absolutely.
So I think we can wrap it up now. So I just want to say, thank you to both of you. It's been a great honor and a privilege for me to share this conversation with you live in Porsche's garage at Le Mans. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And we're looking forward to you us joining for the next episode of The Edge in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at The Edge, a podcast by TAG Heuer. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Edge is also an online magazine. Go to magazine.tagheuer.com for more articles, interviews, and photo series that bring together our love of watches and our desire to push ourselves to the edge of our limits. I'm your host, Theo van den Broeke. Until next time, keep an eye out. This is The Edge.